It is a rainy Monday night in Kenyan capital Nairobi. Good evening from the KTN News Center. On the program tonight, pressure is mounting on Deputy President William Ruto to step aside to pave way for investigation into a controversial 28 billion shilling deal. That, as Murang'a County's Mwangi wa Iria is said to become the first governor to be charged in court over corruption allegation. Is the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission ready to fry some big fish? I'm Ben Kitili, and this is KTN Prime.
Also, in the same breath, we'll be focusing on some of the recommendations that have been given by the Director of Public Prosecutions on some of the files that were handed to him by the EACC. And remember, it is 15 days to go on our graft countdown. This is KTN Prime. I'm Linda Guto. Let's take a look at some of the top stories tonight.
We may not. It's all about integrity as Tobiko now directs the prosecution of the big fish.
The name of Deputy President William Ruto has been associated with each and every conceivable scandal or instance of corruption under the reign of the Jubilee administration.
The Deputy President on the spot over corruption claims.
Others are talking of stock theft. Now, this has to stop.
On the record, calling out the Interior Cabinet Secretary on the ongoing security crisis.
Foster care for defiled teenager as her mother is investigated for abetting the crime. At the bottom end of your screen, we have William Sila, who's our sign language interpreter tonight.
Welcome to the program. Now, Murang'a Governor Mwangi wa Iria and MPs Alfred Keter and Sonia Birdi are said to be charged in court of a breach of the Ethics and Integrity Act in Chapter 6 of the Constitution. Director of Public Prosecutions Keriako Tobiko has given the green light for Mwangi wa Iria to be prosecuted for falsifying information. The DPP has also directed that MPs Keter and Birdi be prosecuted and a procedure to remove them from office be initiated. Rita Tinina reports on the move that could see the two first-time MPs not only lose their seats but also be disqualified from holding public office in future.
That is
you are waiting to hear from who? From God.
And you know what?
Jesus Christ to call you.
An outburst that shocked many.
Okay, Skiza, we will reverse the law. Now, but we have to start the people.
Elected leader Alfred Keter of Nandi Hills constituency and nominated MP Sonia Birdi stormed the Gilgil Way Bridge 3 months ago, demanding the release of a truck that had been detained over lack of proper documents.
The who is running that company?
They unsavory language.
I don't fight small wars. I innocent, stupid people.
Threats to police officers and chest thumping over how they can change the law outraged many Kenyans. Flashback to December 2012. Mwangi wa Iria, then seeking election as Murang'a governor in the 2013 election, is alleged to have sworn a false declaration in his self-declaration form required under the Leadership and Integrity Act. He succeeded in his election, but now the events of 2012 are returning to haunt him. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, which interrogated the governor, forwarded his file to the Director of Public Prosecution days ago, recommending that he faces charges. Now, DPP Keriako Tobiko has accepted the recommendation to charge wa Iria and directed that prosecution commences immediately. Mwangi wa Iria will be the first governor to be arraigned in court over corruption.
We are the ones making laws.
That is not
when we have to break it, we break it when we want.
This is not
The utterances and public display by Nandi Hills MP Alfred Keter, Public Prosecutions, who received their investigation files 7 days ago, has not only accepted EACC's recommendation to charge the two, he has directed prosecution should commence once their files have been merged. And that is not all. The DPP has directed the EACC to forward the matter to Parliament for disciplinary action and to initiate appropriate mechanisms for the removal of the two MPs from office. The two will go into record as the first MPs to be charged for breaching Chapter 6 of the Constitution, a chapter that clearly outlines the tenets of servant leadership. Section 75, Clause 1 of the Constitution states that a state officer shall behave, whether in public and official life, in private life, or in association with other persons, in a manner that avoids any conflict between personal interests and public or official duties, compromises any public or official interest in favor of a personal interest, or demeans the office the officer holds. Section 75, Clause 2 states that a person who contravenes Clause 1 shall be subject to the applicable disciplinary procedure for the relevant office and may, in accordance with the disciplinary procedure, be dismissed or otherwise removed from office. A person who has been dismissed or otherwise removed from office for a contravention of the provision is disqualified from holding any other state office. That means Alfred Keter and Sonia Birdi risk losing their positions and being barred from holding public office. And for the first time, legislators sounding a death knell to their young political careers. The famous Chapter 6 of the Constitution has remained good only on paper. It will be the first time that leaders are facing action over breach of the Constitution. The EACC is seeking to prove that it has the teeth to bite, as the law finally catches up with lawmakers and the county chief executive. Rita Tinina, KTN.
Meanwhile, in Kisumu, anti-corruption officials arrested 4 senior county officers on claims of embezzlement. Embattled County Assembly Speaker Ann Adul and Minority Leader Edwin Anayo are alleged to have committed the crime when they were members of the County Assembly Services Board. The two are expected to be charged in court tomorrow, along with suspended Leader of Majority Samuel Ongo and Assembly Clerk Nelko Sagwe.
They conspired to defraud the Kisumu County government of 17.4 million for 3 international trips to Israel, Singapore, and China. We are also charging them with willful failure to comply with the law relating to procurement. This is contrary to Section 45, subsection 2B, as read with Section 48 of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act.
And as the government cracks the whip on corruption, a looming impasse presents itself.
Deputy President William Ruto has been linked to a controversial 28 billion shilling deal to put up a new referral hospital in Eldoret.
The case has been presented before the National Assembly's Public Investments Committee. As this happens, a section of leaders are asking the Deputy President to step aside.
Now, can the script for the second powerful man on the land possibly be similar to that of his close allies who have had to step aside? KTN's Sharon Momanyi reports.
It has barely been a week since allegations linking Deputy President William Ruto to the hospital upgrade saga came to the fore. Sunday, a Bomet priest asked the DP to step aside to pave way for investigations. Monday, Homa Bay MP Peter Kaluma reiterates the call.
It is insensitive that the Deputy President, seated a heartbeat away from the presidency, which is the topmost leadership position in the country, rests pretty and sees nothing wrong leaving office for the matters to be properly investigated.
The allegations claim that Ruto coerced businessman Herbert Ojwang out of a deal he allegedly sired, one that would see a 17 billion shillings upgrade of the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital. The businessman claims that Ruto elbowed him out of the deal, a deal he claims was further inflated to 28 billion shillings from the proposed 17 billion shillings budget.
The name of Deputy President William Ruto has been associated with each and every conceivable scandal or instance of corruption under the reign of the Jubilee administration. The list has become so long that the name William Ruto is currently an apt synonym of corruption in our country.
With details of the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital saga still unfolding, the Deputy President's name continues to be tarnished. And now with calls to have him step out of office, his most important order of business yet may just be to clear his name. But no solid case has been made yet against the Deputy President. Investigations into the hospital saga continues, with businessman Ojwang last week tabling an audio recording before the Public Investments Committee, alleging it showed how he was coerced to pull out of the deal. The EACC report released in March implicated Ruto's allies, including his Chief of Staff, Marian Kitanyi, Energy CS Davis Chirchir, Agriculture CS Felix Koskei, and Labor CS Kazungu Kambi. Question is, should the fate that befell them also apply to Ruto? Should the Deputy President step aside to pave way for investigations? Sharon Momanyi, KTN.
All right, so let's focus on that story by Sharon Momanyi. It forms the basis of our big question tonight. We are asking, should Deputy President William Ruto step aside from office to allow for investigations?
Indeed, tell us what you think. This is a big story, big discussion tonight. SMS your yes or no response to the number 22155. You can tweet your opinions as well too at Ben_Kitili, at Linda Ogutu, and at KTN Kenya. The hashtag is #GraftDiaries.
Indeed, we'd love to know what you think about that big question. Tonight, let's focus on some of the recommendations that have been given today by the Director of Public Prosecutions. And I want you to put your attention here. I will move back just a little bit to give you the chance to focus on the Super Wall, on some of the recommendations that have been given by the Director of Public Prosecutions. The first one we'll begin with is one that touches on 19 million shillings. It is an inquiry that was into allegations of embezzlement of 19 million by Nairobi City Council officials. EACC recommendation to charge the suspects accepted, and the suspects are already being charged in court. The second one that received the recommendation of the DPP is all the way in Kisumu. It was an inquiry into allegations that a Kisumu county official irregularly contracted an agent at a cost of 15 million for 70 MCAs and members of county staff who traveled to Singapore, Israel and China. EACC recommendation to charge the suspects accepted and prosecution to begin immediately. Here's the thing. The County Assembly Speaker, that is Anne Odul, Leader of Minority Eddie Analo, and Clerk Nelko Sagwe were arrested by EACC officials over graft claims, and they're expected to appear in court tomorrow. The next case focuses on the EPZ. It was an inquiry into allegations of alleged misappropriation of 15.9 million grant by the Ministry of Industrialization to Export Processing Zone Authority. EACC recommended that this file be closed for lack of evidence, and that was accepted by the DPP. That file has been ordered closed. The next focus was on NSSF. It was an inquiry into allegations of irregularities in awarding NSSF tender for surveillance system valued at 244 million shillings. EACC recommendation to close the file for lack of evidence was, however, not accepted by the office of the DPP, and he has directed further investigations to be conducted on this particular case. The next inquiry was into allegations that a deputy county commission and a district clerk, Garissa County, misappropriated relief food meant for the needy and vulnerable people of Garissa sub-county. A prosecution is essentially expected to commence against these suspects. The next case that the DPP focused on, if you could go to the previous board, the next case that the DPP focused on touched on Murang'a Governor Mwangi wa Iria. It was an inquiry into allegations that a governor swore false declaration in the self-declaration form in 2012, falsifying information. EACC recommendation to charge the suspects was accepted, and prosecution will commence immediately. We do not have that board now, but what you have on the Super Bowl right now is a picture of Nandi Hills Member of Parliament Alfred Keter and nominated MP Sanjeev Sonia Bedi. An inquiry into allegations of breach of Chapter 6 of the Constitution of Kenya and the provisions of the Ethics and Integrity Act 2013. Of course, this happened at the Gilgil Way Bridge. It was a story, it was a video that went viral in just minutes after it was put up. Recommendations by EACC to charge the suspects accepted. Here's the thing though, prosecution to commence once the two files have been merged and consolidated, and this case will now be referred to the National Assembly for disciplinary action against the two MPs. Apparently, there are plans to initiate appropriate mechanisms for the removal of the two MPs from office. So what we're looking at is two members of parliament who risk losing their seats. The other case that was focused on was an inquiry into allegations that an acting CEO, Youth Enterprise Development Fund, chaired a committee that approved procurement of hatcheries worth 200 million and further signed an addendum for payment, knowing very well that these were not approved by the board. However, this case is currently awaiting the DPP's decision. Last but not least was an inquiry into the alleged financial impropriety as the National Police Service Commission. This is also a case that is waiting the DPP's decision. And finally, an inquiry into allegations of irregular purchase of Kilifi Governor's residential house that was valued at 168 million shillings. So those are just some of the cases that received the recommendations of the Director of Public Prosecution. Remember, President Uhuru Kenyatta gave the now infamous list to Parliament that happened on 26th of March 2015 as he made his second State of the Nation address before both houses of Parliament. He insisted that leaders who were mentioned in this list had to step aside for the next 60 days. So looking at our graft count, now remember we've been doing this for a while, we have about 15 days to go. So the question is, are we likely to see more prosecutions happening in the next coming days? Kittil, we have 15 days to go. 15,
just slightly more than 2 weeks, and we think some action from the Director of Public Prosecution's office. They say that his team has investigated 25 of the 175, so good action from there. It's still to be seen how that progress goes.
Indeed. Thank you for staying with KTN.
Last week, Friday, leaders from northern Kenya, including West Pokot Senator John Lonyangapuo and Tiaty MP Asman Kamama, were summoned by the CID to record statements over the Nadome massacre that reached its peak on Monday. The events were a culmination of a week that began with that blame game. Now, at the end of the week, more questions remained unanswered, including just who was responsible for the clashes and why hasn't a long-term solution been found. Interior Secretary Joseph Nkaiseri had his own set of answers, and these are the subject of this week's episode of On the Record with KTN's Edith Kimani.
The events of last week have once again shown how little mind the government seems to pay to the issue of security. On Saturday, a group of armed bandits attacked a village in Baragoi, killing 14 people. Exactly 48 hours later, another attack happened in Nadome, where a family of 5 were killed, and it is that attack which is said to have catalyzed this latest wave of violence to the northwest of the country. On Wednesday, please remember the attacks began on Saturday. The Cabinet Secretary, whose core function is to ensure security within Kenyan borders, finally spoke out. After 3 days of silence, this is what he had to say.
The government has today decided to commence with immediate effect operation in the affected areas to arrest the culprit and disarm all the communities in these areas.
There was nothing wrong with Joseph Nkaiseri's speech, but as a strategy, disarmament has historically done little to end clashes in Kenya. Before we even go so far back, let me take you to 6 months ago when 22 police officers were killed by armed bandits in Kapedo. Remember this?
Mimi silaha hizo ambazo zilichukuliwa kutoka hawa askari, mimi sitaki kungojea wiki mbili, nataka zirudishwe leo. Lazima mnajua wako wapi.
Following that ultimatum, only 16 guns were returned. 16. Compare this to the 530,000 to 680,000 illegal firearms in the country, and that's according to a 2012 report by the International Monitoring Group on Small Arms and Light Weapons, and 16 begins to look like a drop in the ocean. In any case, the guns stolen from the slain police officers in that Kapedo attack were 19, not 16. So it means even guns legitimately issued to police officers and stolen by bandits could not be recovered through the disarmament. But the CAS still somehow believes that issuing another ultimatum to disarm will actually work this time.
Why don't you wait for the results?
Unfortunately for Ngaiseri, you might not see anything if we go by history. In the 1920s, British colonialists began Operation Tennis, the earliest recorded civilian disarmament drive in Kenya, in an effort to collect arms from the Turkana community. Now, the pastoralists quickly relocated to avoid giving out their guns, and the disarmament operation failed. In February of 1984, the Moi government launched Operation Nyundo, and that was together with the Ugandan government to disarm the Turkana and Pokot. This time, the disarmament drive was on a large scale with coordinated ground and air troops. The result was civilian deaths and, according to the TJRC report, rape and beatings of the locals. Under Daniel Arap Moi's rule, a reported more than 20 disarmament drives came and went. Then in 2012, Kenya's first Inspector General of Police, David Kimayo, who had just been appointed, ordered a 2-week amnesty under which Tana Delta residents would hand over weapons without fear of retribution. Only 100 weapons were collected. But even with all this historical evidence against a tried, tested, and multiple times failed strategy, the CS insists.
Why don't you wait for the results?
Look, we're not saying that this operation will certainly not work, but there's been little to no information on the said operation. A sweeping statement on how communities will be disarmed and military deployment is all there is. But let's look at this more critically. Turkana County alone, as reported last week, is 77,000 square kilometers. That means Nairobi County, with its 696 square kilometers, is 110 times smaller than Turkana. In fact, Turkana is so large that its northmost point is almost 800 kilometers from its southmost point. And in case you're wondering, that's like traveling from Mombasa to Kisumu in one county. Let's not forget that Turkana is only one of 5 counties where this sort of violence has been commonplace. One of 5 marginalized, highly underdeveloped, large counties. So it's only common sense that getting access to and making any real long-term change will require local leadership. And this is where the other problem comes in.
Instead of preaching peace, some of them are persistently engaged in warlike activities, sometimes encouraging and inciting violence against other communities. This act of terror is unacceptable.
The Cabinet Secretary wants us to believe that politics is all that is at play in their violence. There's no reason not to believe him, and the truth is that the clashes are multifaceted. But the question is, if the Cabinet Secretary knows these said politicians and he claims to know what they have said to fuel the clashes, why has he not done anything about it? Section 77(1) of the Penal Code is clear. Any person who utters any words with a subversive intention is guilty of an offense and is liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 7 years. Subversion is defined under Section 77(3) to include acts intended or calculated to promote feelings of hatred or enmity between different races or communities in Kenya. Section 62(1) of the National Cohesion and Integration Act is even more direct. Now, that act provides that any person who utters words intended to incite feelings of contempt, hatred, hostility, violence, or discrimination against any person, group, or community on the basis of ethnicity or race commits an offense and shall be liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding 1 million shillings or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years or both. Now, the law is clearly on Ngaiseri's side here, so if he is truly serious about ending this violence, why hasn't he used it to bring to book those he says are responsible? Joseph Ngaiseri was nominated to the cabinet on the back of what everybody agreed was utter failure by his predecessor, Joseph Olelenku. And he appeared to know this when he sat before the National Assembly's vetting committee. He made a specific pledge to deal firmly with bandits and cattle rustlers should Parliament endorse his appointment. In fact, he promised.
People are talking of stock exchange. Now others are talking of stock theft. Now this has to stop under my watch, I promise.
A promise that has gone unfulfilled for the over 100 people who died as they waited 3 days for the government to react. A promise that may go unfulfilled if today's strategy has yesterday written all over it. A promise that means nothing without any promising actions.
Let's now take you to the coast. A teenage girl has been separated from her biological mother after it emerged that she had been defiled several times by different men.
But the mother is alleged to have had knowledge of these unfortunate acts but did not report the matter.
The men are said to have taken advantage of the girl as she is disabled. Betty Kialo has the details of this upsetting story from Likoni.
The two men, Sami Ndoro Athumani and Zombo Bakari Kadenge, are alleged to have sexually assaulted the girl several times and at times even beating her while at it. The girl, whom we will call Terry, but it's not her real name, has hearing impairment and also cannot speak. The suspects exploited this to rape her over and over again without the knowledge of her relatives. However, last week, with the help of Likoni police, Terry got courage and identified the two men as her assaulters, who were then arrested and arraigned at the Mombasa Law Court chambers today. The two denied the assault claims. One of them said that he was planning to marry Terry and the parents were in the process of discussing dowry. The other suspect claimed that he only knew her as the wife-to-be to the first suspect and had never raped her, something Terry rubbished as false, with the magistrate asking that both families come forward and testify over the claims. The mother has been faulted for hiding the girl every time she was defiled instead of seeking justice. Investigations are said to be underway to ascertain whether she knew of the defilement or not. In the meantime, the court ruled that the girl be sheltered at a children's rights organization until the case is heard at a special court sitting on Friday, the 15th of May. Betty Kialo, KTN.
Now, livestock farmers in the North Rift region have credited improved production to the increased use of, take this, ultrasound for their cows.
Indeed, Masikande has this fascinating story from the North Rift.
It's the monthly vet visit at the Samo farm in Uasin Gishu County. This visit, though, is different.
And this is the ultrasound machine.
The vet comes with a new technology in town, the ultrasound machine for the heifers, made purposely for the veterinary use, complete with a keyboard, a monitor, and a probe for cow pregnancy confirmatory diagnosis.
If the cow is not pregnant, we see what is happening, what is the ovarian dynamics. Is there follicular cysts or there are luteal cysts, which will make the cow not to come on heat.
For most people, they know ultrasound scanning to be only available for human beings. But the reality is, ultrasound scanning for animals came before the one for human beings came in place.
The automated farming by the Eldor Sirikwa consultants effectively updates farmers on confirming pregnancy at early stages, 30 days after artificial insemination, saving the farmer losses if the AI was not successful. The testing is also able to indicate the age of the fetus and the expected date of calving.
Last year, I visited Holland or Netherlands, and I interacted with consultants who are advising farmers. And a lot of the technology I saw was ultrasound scanning as far as breeding is concerned. And I was like, wow, I've never seen this in Kenya. So I saw it's better we have it available for our farmers.
Sababu mbeleni tulikuwa tunatumia mkono na hatukuwa sure. Sababu tulikuwa tunaweza tumia tuseme ng'ombe iko na mimba, baada ya karibu miezi 4 ama 3 hivi unaona tena ng'ombe inakuja huni tena. Na hapo sasa time itakuwa inaenda, sasa tutakuwa tuna lose a lot.
The ultrasound scanning service is availed monthly at a cost of 500 shillings per visit. The vet says the ultrasound cow pregnancy scanning identifies pregnant and barren cows, including reasons, and gives 99% accurate results. Up to 15 cows can be scanned per hour, and the process is less stressful than manual pregnancy diagnosis.
So at the moment it's working, and the feedback we are getting from farmers is good. So now what we have now gone into now is for contracts. We are going into contract with farmers.
The aim here is to boost production and ensuring that a heifer calves down at intervals of 420 days and not the current average of 560 days. Masikandie, KTN, Uasin Gishu County.
the Energy Regulatory Commission is dispelling fears of fuel shortage in the country. This comes as several motorists complained of having to drive from one fuel station to the next in search of fuel. The regulator did, however, acknowledge that there are supply constraints, but was quick to add that there was ample fuel, with the situation expected to normalize in the next 3 days. Speculation has been rife that oil marketers were hoarding fuel in anticipation of a fuel price hike expected on Thursday. ERC is said to release fuel prices for the next 1 month on the 14th, with indications that prices could rise. Last month, the regulator reduced the price of super petrol by 11 cents a litre, while diesel went up by $1.28. That is a story we'll keep an eye on for you, because quite a number of motorists were stranded today. Now, the cost of power has been coming down over the months with the injection of geothermal energy into the national grid. In February, KTN added 140 megawatts to the grid from Olkaria, bringing to 280 megawatts of power into the national grid. But with thermal energy still used in generation mix in the country, how much further could prices come down? KTN's Abiagina has that report.
The Jubilee government in its party manifesto clearly outlined its pledge to lower the cost of doing business. True to its pledges, the Kenyatta administration has been aggressively championing a campaign to lower energy costs to make Kenya's manufacturing sector competitive. Through an elaborate plan, the government plans to add an additional 5,000 megawatts to the national grid by 2017. On the face of it, the projects have been built to be capital intensive, but some strides have been made.
If you look at the program itself for the 5,000, about 40% of that is going to be coal-based.
Among some of the projects that have been actualized under the watch of the Kenya Electricity Generating Company, KENGEN, is the recent commissioning of the 280 megawatts geothermal power plant in Olkaria. This brought Kenya's total installed capacity to 2,562 megawatts as of the end of April. Latest figures indicate that geothermal accounts for 48% of total installed capacity. This displaced hydro energy, which had proved to be erratic due to changes in weather conditions, to 35% of the installed capacity. However, this shift has been unable to totally displace the more expensive thermal power plants in the country. In simpler terms, geothermal power costs 7 US cents per kilowatt hour. Compare this to 22 US cents per kilowatt hour paid to have diesel generators running.
The idea here is to change the generation mix and diversify it away from medium-speed diesels and away from hydro.
In 2014, Kenya Power paid diesel-powered generators 10.6 billion shillings, indicating a generation mix tilted toward thermal electricity. According to the Energy Regulatory Commission, the diesel generators are still key to the power supply in the country to help stabilize distribution.
Well, the cost of electricity has been a great subject of focus for many Kenyans, and the question has been, when will the cost of electricity begin to be felt at the household level? Well, we spoke to a number of Kenyans and got their views regarding this issue.
Naona a bit imejaribu kushuka. Juu kama mimi nilikuwa nalipa 2,000, siku hizi nalipa 800 to 1,000.
I would say it's more or less the same, because what I used to pay towards the end of last year is about the same amount.
Kwa kweli ukiangalia hii serikali mambo inayosema mara mingi utaenda kinyume.
Pengine serikali upande wao imeshukisha, lakini wale ambao wanahusika na mambo ya stima hawajashukisha bana.
In fact imetriple, haijashuka. Kwa hivyo bei
Abiagina, KTN Business.
Hata kidogo, especially ya kuapply.
The tussle over payment of mining royalties has resumed, with the Ministry of Mining calling out companies failing to comply. On its radar are the Kenya Fluorspar Company, Base Titanium and Magadi Soda, which the ministry says have either understated income from mining activities or outrightly failed to pay royalties. But the mining companies are not taking the accusations lying down. Charles Gitonga with that story.
The Ministry of Mining and mining companies are once again at loggerheads over integrity on declaration of the value of minerals mined, sold and the payment of royalties. The The ministry is pointing an accusing finger to a number of miners, among them Flospa Mining Company, Base Titanium and Magadi Soda, saying they have been understating their production and earnings to deny the state millions of shillings in revenues and promises them that business will not be as usual.
We need to conform to the law in terms of compliance, in terms of reporting, in terms of environmental issues, in terms of paying the dues to the government.
The government expects 2.5% of gross sales for Flospa and 5% of gross sales for rare earth, niobium and titanium as royalties. However, in its view, mining companies have been aggressive in asking for value-added tax refunds, but uncooperative when expected to pay fees.
Base Titanium is demanding 2.5 billion as their refund for VAT. And then they are paying government 100 million Kenya shillings as royalties. Then are we not funding them to take our wealth?
But in a quick rejoinder, Base Titanium gives a conflicting figure of 225.6 million shillings paid to the ministry in royalties since it began mining operations in Kenya. It also adds that the tax refunds are justified by the huge sums amounting to 26 billion shillings spent in building mining projects. The Kenya Flospa Company is also being accused of making about 4 billion shillings annually, but reporting only 300,000 shillings to the government. To that effect, the ministry has launched a task force that will examine its operations in Elgeyo Marakwet County and table a report in 90 days. The task force will also investigate claims of unfair treatment of locals by the company and compensation of owners for the 9,000 acres of land under the company's control.
The task force come with a comprehensive report of what is happening in that area and the mining of Flospa. What are the issues, both even operational issues?
Government is, however, hopeful that its target to collect 1.2 billion shillings from mining royalties in this financial year will be met and has so far collected 845 million shillings. Charles Gitonga, KTN.
All right, you're watching KTN Prime. We thank you for staying with us. Let's just focus just a little bit on some breaking news that you're getting. We understand there's a wall that has collapsed in South B, and the specific area is Mukuru Kayaba. The details are very scanty. We have our team on the way. They're trying to find out what happened. Are there any casualties in this? Once again, a wall has collapsed in South B, that is in Mukuru Kayaba. We understand it's next to a mosque. We're still trying to figure out some of the details. Once we get them, of course, we'll run them by you. Just before we end this bulletin here on KTN Prime, let's now take a look at our financial market report.
Kenya School of Adventures and Leadership organized the sports outdoor activities over the weekend in the foot of Mount Kenya. Participants went through excruciating and energy-sapping sports activities that involved over 40 participants. The organizers are targeting over 500 participants in their main sports challenge in August this year.
It's tough. It's energy sapping, it's fun, it's adventurous. Mountain climbing is not tough for the faint-hearted. The activities that one has to go through before making it to the highest point make the challenge one of a lifetime. The extreme sports event is in its 4th year and was launched as a way to diversify the sports disciplines that exist within the country.
We want to try and give the Kenyan youth a variety of engagements in terms of sporting activities, new things that they can have fun, and also by way of empowering them.
Sawa sawa, one step at a time.
The organizers of the event target youths and the corporate world, with the events tailor-made to suit these groups of people, most of who are busy with their office engagements to get time off it.
what we are presenting is limitless angles towards how we can look at using your body to recreate and also to enjoy nature.
What made the weekend event more appealing was the harsh weather conditions. The area is generally cold, and the rainy season makes the challenge even tougher.
It was amazing, a lifetime experience, one that you cannot buy. I managed to face my worst fear.
The organizers are planning for the main event in August the 7th this year, and it will run through to 9th of August. Hassan Juma, KTN Sports.
Sounds very interesting. Now, Kenya scooped top awards at the international pistol shooting competition held recently. The Kenya team, comprised of Anthony Wahome of the United Nations and Samuel Church of GSU, outshined a field of shooters from several countries to win the 2015 International Police Association pistol shooting competition over 2 days in Malta. It was Kenya's maiden appearance at the event in Malta. The event comprised of both a team event and individual performance. In the team event, Sergeant Samuel Church and Anthony Wahome shot in classic fashion, combining both speed and accuracy to outdo second place Romania by a wide margin. The host Malta came in third place. In the individual event, sensational Samuel Chacha won in another display of finesse and pistol shooting, scooping gold for Kenya. Romania came in second, whereas the hosts were third. The International Police Association is an organization with membership by both serving and retired police officers.
I think Deputy President William Ruto should step aside from office to allow for investigations. Once again, should Deputy President William Ruto step aside from office to allow for investigations? Here's the basis. He's been linked to a controversial 28 billion deal to put up a new referral hospital in Eldoret.
Yeah, and a lot of feedback on tweets and SMSs. No, Simi says this is pure politics for elimination 2017. Who will tie the bell after he steps down? Nothing serious.
Becky Ruja says no, allegations and hearsay shouldn't be used as a basis for anything. Facts be tabled first.
Robert Nkaruya agrees, says investigations must be done first. He cannot resign just because a court hawk has mentioned his name.
Jared Oragi says one should not step aside by mere allegations. EACC should take up the matter and get it to conclusion.
Many thanks for participating on our big question.
Lots of feedback.
Lots of feedback for you, and that is how you polled on Graph Diaries. So remember, I shall continue to keep an eye on this for you and bring you more discussions on Graph Diaries. And many thanks as well for joining us on KTN Prime. I'm Ben Kitili. Good night from the KTN News Center.
And that is how we end KTN Prime. Sleep well. I'm Linda Gutu. We'll see you tomorrow.